So friends, we have been taking up this series on web programming, where we have talked about, basically we have been talking about front end design, and we have looked at various tools and techniques which are available for us to design the web pages. We have done in depth study of various HTML5 elements. We have looked at how style sheets can be embedded and how styles can be used within our web pages. And in the last lecture we were talking about JavaScript. So, we have seen that in order to add some more kind of dynamism to our page, some kind of responsiveness to our page, to make our page more user friendly and to make the processing at the server's end also faster and a faster response time for the page, it is very important and it is very useful that we put in some type of JavaScript into it. So, JavaScript, as we all have already studied, that JavaScript becomes a part of your HTML page, so that you embed the JavaScript in your head portion of your HTML page. And we have talked about a lot of other aspects of JavaScript in the previous lecture, like we have talked about the basic commands which are used in JavaScript, how variables can be declared in JavaScript, what are global variables that can be declared in JavaScript, and how the basic functionality and the different operators which work in JavaScript. So, we have also seen that JavaScript is actually an object based language. Therefore, we have this document object model, the DOM model, that is used in case of JavaScript. So, all the elements on the web page that we are seeing, that is if you are seeing the document or you are seeing a table or you are seeing a form, or within a form also if you are seeing the different controls, like you are seeing the various buttons or you are seeing the text boxes or passwords. So, all these actually are objects, and for all these objects we can define a number of properties, and then there are methods which we can define in order to manipulate the properties of these objects. Now, when we say that we want to manipulate the properties of the objects which are provided on on the browser or on our screen, so then one very important aspect of that becomes functions, right. So, basically what is a function? Like in other programming languages, JavaScript also provides us this construct called the function. So, here a function is basically a group of statements which is put together, which is we say that we define a function once, and then it can be used repeatedly on our web page. So, you can reference your function as many number of times in the web page. So, many a times in some of the context you will hear the name subprogram or procedure or subroutine is also used for functions, right. So, basically it is nothing, it is a it's a small structure, small coding structure that we have created, and this structure we can call wherever we want within our program or wherever we want within our web page. So, functions definitely are very advantageous, because we do not have to write the same code again and again. So, it reduces the number of lines which are written in the code. The code also becomes easier to read and understand because it becomes shorter, and it also is easy to make any changes within the code, because say if the same function you are using at multiple places, right, and if you are not using it in the function format, but you are inserting the lines of code. So, and if now you want to make any change, so then that change has to be applied at all the locations, whereas if you are using a function and you are only calling that function at multiple locations, then you can make change in the function itself only once, and you need not make changes into the individual copies of the same function, because it is only a call which is happening, the function is not changing, right. So, if we look at the syntax of the function, so how basically how the function is defined in JavaScript. So, the first and foremost thing that we will write is the word keyword function. So, this is going to show that the code which is following is going to be a function. then we write the name of the function. So, that is called the function identifier. So, you can give any identifier of your choice. Then you have the parenthesis, and within parenthesis we give some arguments. So, arguments you can give one argument or you can give multiple arguments which are comma separated, and then the entire definition of the function or the code which is there in the function is defined in which is enclosed in curly braces. So, within the opening and closing curly braces we will define the code of the function, that is whatever the function wants to, whatever the function is trying to do, that is defined within the curly braces. So, here this is a very simple format that we are looking at. So, the first thing one has to remember is that the function will always begin with the keyword function, then you will have to name the function, and within parenthesis you can give the argument. So, what are arguments basically? Arguments are those values on which the function is going to act. Like for example, in this function we are passing two arguments to the function, one is the heading and the other is the words. Now, first thing that the function is doing is that it is printing the heading on the screen. So, we are simply writing whatever is passed on as heading into the function, we are writing that on the screen, that is being printed on the screen. And the next thing which is being done is that we are using a for loop. If you can see, we have already discussed how the for loop works. So, you are initializing a loop which is running from 0 to the word length, to the length of the word, and then every time you are incrementing the loop. So, what we are doing here, we are actually finding out, or we are actually taking out each character from the words that are being passed. So, this function is actually going to print a heading and then it is going to print each of the words which are going to be passed to the function. So, we have seen that whenever we talk about JavaScript, we know that we have been saying that JavaScript is actually a case sensitive language, right? And when we say case sensitive, we generally understand that we will use uppercase or lowercase letter, there will be a difference, and generally in case sensitive programming languages lowercase letters are used. But in case of naming the functions in JavaScript, we have a very typical case that is used, that is called as the bumpy case, or sometimes it is known as the camel case also. Now, camel case means that whenever you are going to name a function, the first letter of each word in the name is capitalized except for the very first letter, which is lowercase. Like for example, if we have a function get input, so you can see there the name is composed of two words, get input. So, you are writing the first letter of the second word, that is input, in the capital uppercase, the rest of the letters are written in the lowercase. So, this is a convention which is followed. It is not essential, but generally when we are using the predefined functions in JavaScript, then also we will be using this format, and this is the acceptable format. So, it is always recommended that even user defined functions are named in this particular way, that is which is using the bumpy case or the camel case, in which there is a combination of small and upper and lower case letters which is used for defining the name of the function. Then we talk about the arguments in a function, right. So, we have seen that you can have a comma separated list of data which you will be supplying to the function. So, now arguments will define the interface between the function and the rest of the web page, right, because the arguments is something which is going to be passed to the function, right, and these arguments are passed generally by value. In JavaScript, these are passed by value, although in some of the languages we see that function arguments can be passed by reference also, but in JavaScript we will always pass the arguments to a function by the value. So, arguments can also be an array, right. So, like it can be an array, like for example, we have this particular data type in which we are passing an array which is multiple arguments are being passed into the function display items, right, and this function is then going to display the items v1, v2, v3, v4 and v5. So, when we are actually calling the function, we are calling the function with the 5 values of 5 animals, and the function itself is using these v1, v2, v3, v4 and v5 to accept the values. So, the upper line shows the values which are being passed to the functions, and within the parenthesis are the arguments of the function, that is how many variables can be passed. So, we can see here that in this function it is going to print all these values. So, this is the function what it is doing, it is accepting 5 values from the user and it is going to print those values on the screen using document.write. Needless to remind that document.write is the method for writing anything or for printing any output on the screen. So, document is the object and write is the method. So, we are using the write method of the document object to print anything on the user's console, right. So, it is going to simply display the names whatever have been passed. So, basically what we are doing when we are calling the function, we are passing certain values to it, and in the argument the values are being copied, and on those values the function is going to act, or those values the function is going to perform. Now, functions also they can be called in two ways. So, first way of calling a function, where we call the function in the form of a complete statement, right. So, we have defined a function, say function is pop up, okay, and it simply alerts whatever message is given to the function, and then you call the function by its name and pass the argument to it, right. So, this is a simple complete statement by which you are calling the function, right. Another way of calling a function is when the call is a part of a statement, okay. So, in this case we will always the function should always have a return value, because you will accept the value which the function is returning into some variable. Like in this case we have this function add ab, okay, and the function is returning a value c. So, when actually we are calling the function, when we are calling the function add 2, 4, so we are passing the arguments 2 and 4 to the function, and we are holding the value which the function is returning in sum. So, actually you can call the function as a complete statement in itself, or you can call the function as a part of another statement, okay. So, when you are calling it as part of another statement, then your function will always return a value. So, there are two ways of calling. Another important thing to remember here is that generally we will declare all functions, we will define all functions in the header portion, right. So, before you actually call a function should be defined in case of JavaScript. So, it is always recommended that the functions should be defined in the head portion, because you can call the functions from anywhere, you can call them from the head or you can call them in the body portion also. So, you will define them beforehand and then only you can call that particular function. Then we have another terminology which is very commonly used here, which is called as methods, right. Now, methods, what are methods? Basically methods are also a type of function only, okay, but they are stored as properties of object, right. So, methods actually store the properties of certain objects, they can be used to manipulate the properties of those objects, right. So, we can have 3 types of functions we talk about generally. So, we talk about predefined functions, okay, we talk about top level or built-in functions, right. So, event handlers, when we say, so event handlers are the functions which are predefined with JavaScript, right. So, event handler is what we will discuss event handlers in detail later on, but we need to understand that this is this is sort of predefined with JavaScript and it comes along. So, you do not have to write the function for the event and it automatically takes care of it, right. So, basically there is no difference between the predefined function and the function which is defined by the user. So, we call it as customized function or user defined function, right. So, but in functionality both are same. The only major difference being that predefined functions are ready to use, so you can directly put them in your program. So, there are some other functions also, like we come across a function called parseInt function, or a parseInt method, we can say. So, what is parseInt? ParseInt is a method which is used for converting any text information which is entered by the user into integer, right. For example, whenever we have a text box, we ask the user to enter a number. So, that number is actually considered as a text, because a text box accepts only text values. So, if you want to process that number, if you want to mathematically process that number, then you will have to convert that number into integer format, and for that you will use the parseInt function. Likewise, we can also have the parseFloat function. ParseFloat function also does the similar thing, that it will convert any text data which is entered into a floating point number. So, both these functions or both these methods, whatever we can call them, these are very common and very popularly used methods. Then also, you know, when we are talking about variables, because when we have a function, we are using certain variables within a function also, and then there are variables which are used throughout the program also. So, the variables, you know, which are declared within a function, you know, using the where keyword, will make them a local variable, that is, their scope will remain within that function only, right. They are available only within that function, and outside of that function it will have no meaning. The variable will not exist outside of that function. Whereas global variables, they, you know, they sort of make the logic of the program more complicated. Okay, they can make reuse and maintenance of the code also very difficult, because these global variables are accessible throughout the code. So, they are not belonging to any one particular function, but they are belonging to the entire program or the entire, you know, the script that we have written. So, actually the best thing is to always, you know, avoid or minimize the use of global variables when you are creating the program. Most of the variables that we should create and we should use should be the local variables within the function, because those variables can be easily controlled and they can be easily understood as compared to the other type of global variables. So, now we, you know, also understand that what is functions, and, you know, we also know that what are methods. Now, one very important aspect of JavaScript is, you know, event driven programming. That is, JavaScript allows the user to, you know, interact with the web page, interact with the elements on the web page, and then accordingly, you know, an output can be generated. So, whenever a user interacts with a web page, we say that an event has occurred, and then corresponding to that event, we can define certain code or we can define certain action that is going to take place. So, what is event handlers? Basically, event handlers are those functions, these are special functions which come predefined with JavaScript. Okay, so, they are actually called, whenever event handlers are defined or whenever they are called from the HTML part of the web page. Why? Because I am saying that whenever the user will interact with any of the HTML elements on the page, say for example, the user will click on a button, or the user will, you know, click inside a text box or click outside a text box. So, whatever the user is doing, whenever a user interacts with the elements of the web page, whatever action the user does on the web page, it will always result into some kinds of events, right. So, there are n number of events, you know, which can be defined, like for example, you know, when you click with the mouse, so that is a mouse click event. When you double click with the mouse, that is a double click event, right. When you bring the mouse over something, that is on mouse over event. When the mouse goes out of something, it is called on mouse out, right. So, whenever, you know, how does the event whole thing, how does it work basically? Because we understand that, you know, there is a document object model which JavaScript will always reference, right. So, this document object model plays a very important role in locating the object on the web page, right. So, first, say for example, we are looking at the mouse over event, right. So, say the user will move the mouse over any object, right. Now the event senses that something happened to the object. Why? Because mouse has rolled over the object, right. Now the JavaScript event handler will tell the object what to do. Okay. So you have already defined an event handler. Now this event handler is going to say that what needs to be done, and then you will use the document object model. The handler will use that to locate the object on the web page, and then the last is that the object's image source is changed. For example, we say that when the mouse moves over an image, the image should zoom up, right, it should zoom out. So that is the action which is going to take place. So there are, these are the 5 clearly defined steps that take place. So first you have a user's action which is taking place. User's action causes the event to be triggered or the event to be sensed. Then the JavaScript event handler is going to take out or understand which object in the document object model is using it, and then finally some action is going to take place on that object. So this way event driven programming works. This is this is sort of the theory behind how events are managed within JavaScript. There is a lot more when we talk about event driven programming, there is a lot more to discuss. So we will continue in the next lecture. Till then, please keep watching CEC. Thank you.